Tonight, we begin with a development that U.S. officials had feared, European diplomats had dismissed, and Israeli defense analysts had quietly prepared for. A confrontation that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in 72 hours. 72 hours that shattered any remaining illusions about diplomatic progress. 72 hours that pushed two nations closer to the brink than they've been since 2020. 72 hours that forced the White House to activate protocols reserved for genuine crisis scenarios. What Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian did this week crossed a line that Washington had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, President Donald Trump did not hesitate. He responded with precision, with severity, and with a message that left no room for interpretation. But Trump wasn't the only one watching. In Tel Aviv, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was already positioning forces, not for deterrence, not for signaling, but for what Israeli officials are now calling a surgical strike capability, assets moved into position and awaiting only a single command. This is the moment the Middle East has been dreading. This is the moment that could reshape everything. And tonight, we break down every detail of how we got here, what just happened, and what comes next. For several months now, there had been signals, not from official Iranian channels, not from formal diplomatic communications, just signals that Pezeshkian was preparing something unprecedented. Pezeshkian has been defiant, yes, but he has been calculated in his defiance. His moves have followed a certain rhythm, a predictability, almost a choreography that Western intelligence agencies had learned to read. Tehran would escalate rhetorically, then pause. They would advance their nuclear program incrementally, then offer vague reassurances. They would arm proxies aggressively, then signal openness to back-channel discussions. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and Jerusalem this month was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian military communications know the indicators: the movement of centrifuge components between facilities, the activation of air defense systems around sensitive sites, the sudden increase in encrypted traffic between Tehran and Hezbollah command structures, the rotation of Revolutionary Guard commanders into forward positions. All of that went quiet. And whenever Iran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was tactical. It was the silence of preparation. American satellites detected unusual activity at Fordow, the underground enrichment facility built into a mountain near Qom. Israeli drones picked up movement at Natanz that didn't match any known pattern. British intelligence intercepted communications suggesting that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had personally authorized something, though the specifics remained unclear. For weeks, analysts debated what it meant. Some argued Pezeshkian was consolidating domestic support by appearing strong. Others believed Iran was preparing a diplomatic gambit, creating leverage before approaching the negotiating table. A smaller group, the ones who turned out to be right, believed Tehran was preparing to cross a threshold that would change everything. Early Tuesday morning, U.S. intelligence agencies detected what they described as significant nuclear-related activity at multiple Iranian facilities, including uranium enrichment acceleration that had not been observed in over 4 years. These were the kinds of actions that Iran only takes when they are signaling something very specific: a breakout timeline acceleration, a negotiating pressure tactic, or preparation for a weapons-capable threshold. American analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its nuclear posture. And when a threshold state shifts posture without explanation, even by small measures, Washington pays attention. The International Atomic Energy Agency released a terse statement Wednesday confirming that Iran had begun enriching uranium to 90% purity at Fordow, the level required for nuclear weapons. 90%. That number matters because it represents a fundamental shift. Iran had previously enriched to 60% and claimed it was for medical isotopes and research purposes. International observers were skeptical but couldn't definitively prove weapons intent. At 90%, there is no civilian justification. There is no medical application. There is only one purpose for uranium enriched to weapons-grade levels. And Iran had just crossed that line. Pezeshkian, in a televised address from Tehran, claimed the enrichment was a response to what he called American economic terrorism and Zionist threats of aggression. He said Iran had the right to develop whatever capabilities it deemed necessary for national defense. He said the era of Iranian submission to Western pressure was over. And he said, in words that sent shockwaves through every capital in the region, that Iran would not be intimidated by threats, whether they came from Washington or Tel Aviv. The response issued by the White House Thursday evening was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Official after official, briefing after briefing, described Iran's move as provocative, dangerous, and perhaps most importantly, potentially irreversible if not addressed immediately. President Trump, speaking from the Oval Office, did not mince words. Iran has made a catastrophic miscalculation, he said. They believe that because the world is distracted, because there are conflicts elsewhere, that they can sneak toward a nuclear weapon without consequences. They are wrong. They are profoundly wrong. And they are about to learn just how wrong they are. Within hours, the Treasury Department announced the most comprehensive sanctions package ever imposed on Iran. These weren't the targeted measures of previous administrations. These weren't the incremental escalations that gave Tehran room to maneuver. These were total economic warfare sanctions, measures that the United States only deploys when it is preparing to completely isolate a nation from the global financial system. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Trump's address, the Treasury designated Iran's entire central banking system as a sanctions target, effectively cutting Tehran off from any dollar-denominated transactions worldwide. The Commerce Department added 247 Iranian entities to the restricted list, including companies that had previously been granted waivers for humanitarian goods. The State Department revoked all remaining diplomatic visas for Iranian officials and announced the closure of diplomatic back channels that had been maintained even during previous tensions. And the Pentagon confirmed that additional carrier strike groups were repositioning toward the Persian Gulf. But the sanctions were only half of the American response. The other half was happening in Israel. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that they had elevated readiness levels across all branches and moved specialized strike assets into forward positions, including F-35I stealth fighters that had recently been equipped with bunker-penetrating munitions for what analysts believe was exactly this scenario. Netanyahu addressed the Knesset in an emergency session Thursday night. Israel will not wait for Iran to complete what it has started, he said. We will not wait for a nuclear weapon to be assembled. We will not wait for a missile to be armed. If Iran crosses the threshold, we will act. And we are prepared to act alone if necessary. Israeli officials confirmed that targeting packages had been updated. They confirmed that pilots had been briefed. They confirmed that intelligence assets in Iran had been activated for real-time coordination. In other words, Israel is no longer in a deterrence posture. Israel is in a pre-strike posture. The surgical strike capability Netanyahu referenced isn't hypothetical. It's operational. Israeli military sources speaking to international media described the preparations as the most advanced they've seen since the 2007 strike on Syria's nuclear reactor, the operation that destroyed Assad's covert weapons program before it could become operational. That strike succeeded because Israel acted before Syria could disperse its nuclear materials. Israel is now positioning to do the same thing with Iran, but on a vastly larger scale. Fordow presents unique challenges because it's buried deep underground. Natanz has been hardened since the Stuxnet attack. Parchin, the suspected weapons design facility, has layers of air defense that would require suppression before any strike could succeed. Israeli planners have spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. And tonight, those plans are no longer theoretical. They're on the table. They're awaiting only authorization. And here's where the story becomes even more volatile. American intelligence analysts now believe that Pezeshkian's decision to accelerate enrichment was designed to test the resolve of the United States after Washington's attention had been consumed by other global crises. Iran wanted to see whether America would respond with rhetoric or with action. Iran wanted to see whether Trump's second term would feature the same maximum pressure campaign as his first, or whether domestic political considerations would create hesitation. But instead, the opposite happened. The White House didn't hesitate. They responded with sanctions so comprehensive, so immediate, that even Iranian officials appeared caught off guard. You don't get Tehran's attention easily. But today, Trump did. defense officials speaking with journalists under anonymity described Iran's enrichment acceleration as a threshold probe, a way to test how close they could get to weapons capability without triggering military action. But the American and Israeli response proved today that the threshold is lower than Tehran calculated. Their sanctions were not only rapid, they were coordinated so precisely that European allies, often reluctant to follow American financial pressure, fell into line within hours. The European Union announced its own supplementary measures Friday morning. Britain froze Iranian assets held in London financial institutions. France recalled its ambassador from Tehran for consultations. Germany suspended all remaining trade relationships that had survived previous sanctions rounds. That coordination matters because it shows Iran miscalculated not just American resolve, but Western unity. It shows that Pezeshkian is not dealing with a divided opposition. He is dealing with a consolidated response. As reports continued coming in throughout Friday, we learned more about the scale of the American-Israeli response. The U.S. Navy confirmed that the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group was repositioning from the Mediterranean toward the Strait of Hormuz, forcing Iranian naval commanders to adjust defensive positions. Israeli Air Force assets targeted radar installations in Syria that had been upgraded in the last 6 months with Russian technical assistance. American cyber operations, operating from classified locations, reportedly disrupted communications networks used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard to coordinate with proxy forces across the region. This wasn't just economic pressure. This wasn't just diplomatic isolation. This was strategic encirclement. This was preparation for escalation. And preparation for escalation is the one thing Iran has struggled to counter since the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in 2020. For every advance Iran has made in its nuclear program, America and Israel have countered with something that complicates Iranian planning. For every proxy force Iran has armed, there has been a strike that degraded their capabilities. For every defensive system Iran has deployed, there has been intelligence penetration that mapped its vulnerabilities. Tehran believed the correlation of forces was shifting in their favor. Tonight's events suggest they were wrong. Remember, Iran thought the 2015 nuclear deal proved that the international community would accept their right to enrichment. They thought the Biden administration's reluctance to reimpose maximum pressure meant American resolve had weakened permanently. They thought regional conflicts had created so much distraction that a quick sprint toward weapons capability would go unchallenged. They thought Pezeshkian's reputation as a reformist would provide diplomatic cover for accelerated enrichment. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The international community is more unified against Iranian enrichment than at any point since 2012. American resolve has been demonstrated in the most concrete terms possible: comprehensive sanctions backed by military positioning. Regional conflicts have not distracted from Iran. They've reminded Western capitals why Iranian nuclear weapons would be catastrophic. And Pezeshkian's reformist reputation has been shattered. He's now viewed as either complicit in hardliner nuclear ambitions or incapable of restraining them. What makes this moment so dangerous and so consequential is that Pezeshkian's decision to accelerate enrichment happened at a time when Iran's supreme leader is under immense internal pressure. Hardliners want visible progress toward nuclear capability as a guarantee of regime survival. Reformists want economic relief from sanctions that have devastated the Iranian middle class. Revolutionary Guard commanders want resources for proxy operations across the region. The Iranian public wants basic economic stability that has been impossible under sanctions pressure. Khamenei is balancing these demands while his health reportedly continues declining. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. They're doing it because internal dynamics have made caution politically impossible. That's what makes the situation so volatile. Iran isn't acting from a position of strategic confidence. Iran is acting from a position of regime anxiety. And anxious regimes make dangerous decisions. The White House warning, now circulating through diplomatic channels worldwide, was designed to signal that America is not willing to accept a nuclear-armed Iran under any circumstances. Officials said plainly that Iran's enrichment acceleration was inconsistent with the behavior of a nation seeking peaceful nuclear energy. That is diplomatic language for, "We know exactly what you're doing, and we will stop you." You don't usually hear that tone from American officials unless something serious is at stake. The Joint Chiefs of Staff held an emergency session Friday afternoon. The National Security Council convened in the Situation Room for what sources described as the longest continuous meeting since the early days of the Ukraine conflict. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke directly with Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar for over 2 hours. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirmed that rules of engagement for American forces in the Persian Gulf region had been updated. Every indicator suggests this is not posturing. This is preparation. Meanwhile, Netanyahu addressed the Israeli public in a somber, direct speech Friday evening. He said, "For 40 years, Iran has promised to destroy us. For 40 years, they have armed our enemies. For 40 years, they have worked toward the weapon that would make their threats achievable. We will not give them that weapon." He said, "Israel seeks peace with all our neighbors. We have proven that with Egypt. We have proven that with Jordan. We have proven that with the Abraham Accords. But we will never make peace with those who seek our annihilation." And he said, "If Iran believes that enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels will go unanswered, they are making the same miscalculation that others have made before, and they will suffer the same consequences." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a nation that understands just how high the stakes have become. Israel has a phrase for existential military situations: "Ein brera," there is no choice. Tonight, Netanyahu invoked that phrase explicitly. Israel views a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat that must be prevented at any cost. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's enrichment acceleration wasn't isolated. Along with the 90% enrichment breakthrough, Hezbollah forces in Lebanon also elevated their readiness posture, moving rocket systems into launch positions along the Israeli border. Houthi forces in Yemen increased drone and missile attacks targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq increased harassment operations targeting American military installations across the region. All of this happened within the same 72-hour period. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. It means Tehran is coordinating an escalation strategy across its entire proxy network. It means the nuclear component is not standalone. It's part of a broader pressure campaign designed to stretch American and Israeli resources across multiple fronts simultaneously. That coordination is what alarmed Pentagon planners most. A nuclear provocation alone could be addressed through focused response. But a nuclear provocation combined with regional proxy activation suggests Iran is preparing for a sustained confrontation, not backing down from pressure, but raising it. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing to complete a nuclear device rapidly, presenting the world with a fait accompli before military strikes can prevent it. Another is that Iran is attempting to extract maximum concessions through nuclear brinkmanship, hoping that the threat of conflict will force the United States back to negotiations on Iranian terms. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to provoke a limited military confrontation that would rally domestic support, justify further nuclear progress, and fracture international unity through the fog of war. But today, Trump and Netanyahu took that card off the table. They didn't wait for international consensus. They didn't delay pending diplomatic consultations. They didn't offer face-saving compromises that would allow Iran to claim victory. They responded with overwhelming economic and military pressure designed to deny Iran any advantageous path forward. What we're watching now is a test of credibility. Iran wants to see whether it can achieve nuclear threshold status without triggering military action. The United States and Israel want to show that the costs of nuclear pursuit will always exceed any possible benefits. Europe wants to prevent a regional war that would send oil prices skyrocketing and refugee flows surging. And the broader Middle East wants to prevent the nuclear proliferation cascade that would follow if Iran succeeds. Because if Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt will pursue their own. The stakes extend far beyond this immediate confrontation. They extend to the entire global non-proliferation architecture. They extend to the fundamental question of whether determined states can achieve nuclear weapons despite international opposition. If Iran succeeds, others will try. If Iran is stopped, others will reconsider. That's why this moment matters beyond the immediate parties involved. Tonight, we've heard from Pentagon officials who are now monitoring Iranian military communications in real time. They say Iran has activated additional air defense systems around nuclear facilities. They say Revolutionary Guard commanders have been ordered to their posts. And they say Iran's decision to enrich to weapons-grade levels is likely part of a broader strategy intended to create irreversible facts before external intervention can succeed. But Israel is not backing down. In fact, Israel is accelerating preparations. Their response today, rapid, coordinated, and comprehensive, sent a message to Tehran that the window for nuclear breakout is closing. And it sent a message to Washington that Israel is prepared to act independently if American support wavers. That message matters because it removes any Iranian hope of exploiting potential gaps between American and Israeli positions. There is no gap. There is unified determination to prevent Iranian nuclear weapons. As the weekend unfolds, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with this escalation. But what we do know is that the American and Israeli response was timely. It prevented Iran from achieving nuclear threshold status without consequences. It demonstrated that Western unity could be mobilized rapidly when faced with genuine proliferation threats. And it positioned military forces for any contingency while economic pressure takes effect. What happens next will depend on what Iran does in the next 72 to 96 hours. If they pause enrichment and signal openness to negotiations, this moment will be remembered as a successful application of maximum pressure. If they continue advancing toward weapons capability, Israel and the United States have already shown they are ready for more escalatory responses. They have shown they are ready to respond. They have shown that rhetoric about preventing Iranian nuclear weapons is backed by genuine capability and willingness. And tonight, for the first time in years, Iran appears to be reconsidering. Tehran is quiet, too quiet. And when Iran is quiet after an escalation of this magnitude, it means they are recalculating. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Iran learned something they have learned before, but seem to have forgotten. America under Trump does not bluff. Israel under Netanyahu will not accept existential threats passively. And the window for nuclear ambiguity is closing faster than Tehran anticipated. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The era of Iranian nuclear salami tactics, slow, incremental advances designed to avoid triggering response, may be ending. The era of consequence-free enrichment is definitely ending. And the era of assuming that international distraction would provide cover for nuclear breakout was always an Iranian miscalculation. We will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds. The sanctions are crushing. The strike preparations are real. And the choice now belongs to Tehran. Choose wisely, because the next miscalculation could be the last.